In the weather this afternoon, a strong southern stream system moves through the Gulf Coast region, and we're looking for a major pattern change coming up in the next week or two. The world's hot spot today, Birdsville, Australia, 111 degrees, close to the population of 110. And if you've ever wondered what Birdsville looks like, well, there you go. Looks a little bit like Arizona. The world's cold spot today is Daliankir, Russia, at minus 66 degrees. Now, Oymyakon is traditionally considered the cold pole for Siberia, but I went and looked at some records. Daliankir is even colder, but it's a very remote part of Siberia. It is along the Yakutsk-Magadan highway, so it can be visited, but as we can see, there's not very much there. There's a look a little bit down the road towards that split to the old bridge, and I guess it's a good thing they put the new bridge in. There's a look at the surface analysis for this afternoon. Seems like a recurring theme. We're in between weather systems. We've got a big ridge extending through the central part of the country. However, the southern storm track right there along the southern border. And we do have one weather system moving through Louisiana and Arkansas. Now, if you look at the official weather analysis, they've got the systems set up like this. Frontal low around Lake Charles and Beaumont, and this little occluded system in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But I've gone a little bit different with the details here. This looks like two connected weather systems, and you can see this very warm air around Austin and San Antonio. The potential temperature analysis, which basically corrects the temperature for elevation, does reveal somewhat of a front right there with another front extending further back. And that's kind of what I've gone with. I think the true occlusion extends from about Fort Worth up towards around Duncan, Oklahoma, something like that. Then we've got the southern system right there, and they are connected with this frontal boundary. We are tapping some rich tropical moisture down there, 1.5 inches of precipitable water in southern Louisiana. And going into this evening, it continues advecting north into Alabama and Georgia. And that's supporting this line of convection that's moving into the Mississippi River Valley and into the state of Mississippi itself. Don't have any severe weather in this at this time. We don't have too much instability, but definitely plenty of heavy rain to go around. And in areas north of a line from about Mountain Home to the Boot Hill of Missouri, it's coming down as snow. Here's the 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness. This does support a front out there in the Gulf. You can see the thermal gradient well defined along the coast, so we definitely want to take that front further to the southeast. So that's going to be the synoptic scale front. And probably that connects further back out in this area, maybe a little bit of a stable wave around Chihuahua. So looking at this map, I would probably take that cold front and continue it back into the mountains, connecting with this front, and then maybe put this in as a secondary frontal system. So those are some of the problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and rather than fix the analysis and show you that, I figured you might want to see some of the problems that we deal with, and that's one of them, resolving the structure of these complex systems. Let's take a look at the weather around the country, starting with the northeastern U.S. We have a winter storm warning tomorrow for the Appalachians from the Poconos, northern New Jersey, State College, all the way down through western Virginia and into North Carolina. That area right there, looking at 4 to 8 inches of snow, with 3 to 6 inches further south where it becomes more of a mix of precipitation. And around that, a large winter weather advisory covering the surrounding areas. That's basically west of Allentown, Lancaster, Sterling, Fredericksburg. Those areas looking for lesser snowfall amounts, with sleet and freezing rain further south into North Carolina. And as you might guess, that's due to that system coming out of the Mississippi River Valley, heading up the coast and interacting with some of that cold air lurking to the north. In the southeastern U.S., we have a winter storm watch for the mountains south of Asheville for all of tomorrow morning due to significant freezing rain being forecast up to about 1/3 of an inch of ice, and a winter weather advisory extending down into the Chattahoochee Forest in the northern counties of Georgia, also due to freezing rain. For today, that southerly wind is blowing. We've had wind advisories for much of southern Louisiana, Lafayette, and Lake Charles due to gusts up to 35. And for tomorrow, much of lower Florida under a marginal risk of severe weather due to a moderately unstable environment with some shear. There could be isolated tornadoes. And I will mention that going into Monday and Tuesday with the next system, the entire Gulf Coast region being monitored for the potential for severe weather. We'll cover that shortly. In the south central U.S., fair weather along the I-35 corridor from Dallas southward, fair skies, mild conditions. However, a big change coming up for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And to explain that, we'll go up to 500 millibars, look at the Q vectors. This is where we're at this evening. There's that area of lift from New Orleans up to Memphis. Subsidence coming back in behind that. Here's one wave moving through the Four Corners area, but the big one is lurking well up towards the northwest. And you're going to see that drop in. Here it comes right there into the base of this long wave trough. And watch that dig in and amplify. Moving through the Four Corners area on Sunday, a lot of lift across Arizona and New Mexico. And that comes together across Texas on Monday and spreads into the lower Mississippi River Valley. Large area of lift from New Orleans up to St. Louis, Chicago, and over to the Appalachians. And that will be interacting with some of that rich tropical air in the Gulf. And we're going to have quite a whopper of a storm come together in the south central U.S. out to the Ohio River Valley. So we'll look at that shortly, but that's how it comes together, and that's where it is right now, well up there in the Pacific. And believe it or not, there are Hurricane Hunter airplanes in, I think, southeastern Alaska sampling that wave, so they can get a good input into the models, and hopefully that will resolve the details a little bit better. All right, let's look at the surface forecast. This has all of the important fields. It might be a little bit messy, but I know you want to see the details. And I've got the winds on here. I've got the clouds. That's that gray shading. I've got the snow. That's the blue shading. And we've got the wave coming in from the Pacific. So let's go into the overnight hours. Kind of a fast-moving system already coming into the Cascades early tomorrow morning. There's that snow developing. We do have a winter storm warning for all of the higher elevations of southwestern Oregon for tomorrow, mostly above 3,000 feet. They're expecting 6 to 12 inches of snow, and a winter weather advisory for all of the Cascades up to Washington above 2,000 due to 2 to 6 inches of snow and much higher amounts in the higher elevations. None of the cities are affected, but it's important to stay off of the logging roads, stay off of the small rural roads, as it will be very easy to get stuck there. Let's bring that into the afternoon. Now we're moving into the Sierras, and out there we do have a winter storm warning as well. That's tomorrow and tomorrow night, looking for 12 to 24 inches of snow, winds gusting to 55 miles an hour, snow levels down as low as 1,500 feet tomorrow. Lots of melting from 1,500 to 3,000, but higher amounts as you get into those higher elevations. And the passes, Truckee, those will all be affected. Kind of a classic Donner Party storm. So, yeah, probably don't want to be hanging around Donner Lake there. And as we go into the evening, you can see that storm blitzed right through the Mojave region. The Tehachapi Pass is affected as well. Interstate 5 may shut down temporarily, or there may be treacherous conditions through there. We're going to see up to about 3 inches of snow through that area, and Ron Chalfant out there in the mountains near Riverside, he may see some snow as well. And you can see that snow up there moving through the Four Corners area. The Mogollon Rim, Flagstaff, Grand Canyon, Painted Desert, they're going to be seeing 1 to 4 inches of snow with 4 to 8 above 6,000, and even higher amounts up in the mountains. And that extends all the way into southwestern Colorado and parts of Utah. All right. So a lot to cover there. And then going into New Mexico. Winter storm watch around the Gallup area up to Farmington, and we may see additional advisories come down the pipe. So heading into late Sunday, now we're starting to interact with that tropical moisture, picking up convective bands from Houston to Dallas, Oklahoma City, and up towards Hutchinson, Kansas. I do think that the dry line may become active pretty far to the south. Not sure about storm activity, but the front, that's going to be roughly through here early Monday. So it's pulling on out of the higher terrain, and now we're starting to get kind of a classic Great Plains system. You can see that wraparound, lots of snow from St. Louis across Topeka and down into the Texas Panhandle. The higher snowfall totals will probably be in Missouri into western Illinois, looking for probably about 3 to 5 inches of snow. I was looking at why don't I go and show you that? And that's going to be this wind speed and wind gust chart. The wind speed indicated by the barbs and the gusts indicated by the blue lines through here. Now, it's kind of a mess, but you can definitely pick out the higher winds, 45 to maybe 50 knot gusts from El Paso down to Chihuahua. And as the weather system pulls out of the Rockies, those gusts spread out into the plains. By late Monday, gusting to about 45 to 50 knots in Amarillo as that cold northerly flow comes out of Kansas. And you can see some artifacts that are very useful for the forecast, like right here. See that right along Interstate 30, I guess? We go from very high gusts to almost, very little gusts, maybe 20 to 30 knots. And that indicates an air mass discontinuity. Out here in the warm sector, gusting up to 40 to 45 knots in Mississippi. And as you might guess, that could mean some severe potential. But further north, we hit that warm front and we get into a colder air mass. So we can use this to kind of figure out where the important air masses are. Then going into Tuesday, not as much wind out in Missouri as I had thought earlier, maybe 35 knots around St. Louis, but this does not really point to blizzard conditions. So this may be kind of a classic winter storm across that part of the country, and certainly it will pick up some blowing snow, but this will lean more towards a snowstorm than a blizzard, so you don't have to worry about that. Most of the wind hazards will be out in the warm sector. You can see it picking up to about 30, maybe 40 knots across the Appalachians for early Tuesday and then spreading into New York for late Tuesday. And yeah, look at those strong westerlies coming into the Pacific Northwest. That's significant as well. But yeah, I did want to go back to this chart so you can see the precipitation. This is a 995 millibar low, and by early Tuesday, deepening to 990 and down to 984. So this is not going quite as severe as what the Wednesday models were showing, but still definitely a significant Great Lakes event. Lots of wraparound through Chicago into St. Louis for late Tuesday, and then moving on up into the Toronto and Montreal region. And here comes a little bit of Arctic air from the north and another weather system coming in from the Pacific. Now, let's talk about this polar air. So I'm going to steer things up north, and there's that weather system that's going to be heading into the south central and Midwest region in a couple of days. So that is on the way. Up in Alaska, there has been some moderation of the temperatures. We had minus 20 to minus 30 earlier this week. It has warmed up to about 0, maybe teens and 20s further to the south. So what has happened is the strong gradients have kind of torn up the air mass a little bit and filtered some of that modified tropical air to the surface. And as we look further out to the east, starting to see some bitterly cold temperatures, minus 38 south of Inuvik, and out there in the high Arctic, looking at about, this is probably typical cold weather, minus 10 to minus 20. That's about what we should see, but in the Northwest Territories, much colder than usual for this time of year. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Arctic air on the way. You're going to see it come together here. This is a chart showing the surface temperature. The aqua colors are about minus 10 to minus 25, which is what we should have this time of year in the northern Arctic. So these aqua colors right here, that is normal. Down south, aqua is a little unusual. We should see that in the purple range. So as we move forward, these orange colors, those are significant because those are about minus 30 to minus 40 Fahrenheit. So anytime you see this orange, that is very significant. So as we go forward, let's go into tomorrow, you're going to see Arctic air developing up there near Resolute and Eureka, and it tends to expand. Look at that right there. The oranges are picking up in aerial coverage and more of it developing around southern Nunavut and Baffin Island. Going into Monday, even more orange. That is below normal even for the Arctic. And we start getting into some of the yellows. Those are going to be minus 40 to minus 50. And what you see here is not only the orange appearing, but also expansion of that aqua color. Because Arctic air has a couple of important properties, not only the temperature, but also the aerial extent and the depth. And the size of that aqua color, that shows you that it is covering a very large volume of the Arctic basin. And this orange, that's just icing on the cake. So as we go into midweek, it is starting to expand south. The aqua is coming into Montana, and some of it settling in across the Rockies, where it becomes entrenched. So probably parts of the Fraser River Valley becoming very cold, and also those gap winds will get started in southeastern Alaska maybe for Wednesday and Thursday, and then shifting down the coast towards Washington towards the weekend. And here, this is what's important. You can see the core of the Arctic air, the orange, it tends to stage southward. So it kind of goes from its native location and then kind of hopscotches down towards Alberta and sits there and reinforces itself. And by the time we get up to Monday, January 15th, that's going to be the end of the run. A large volume of very cold air settling across Montana. And you probably wonder what that means for U.S. temperatures, so I'll just take you through that. Let's go through Sunday and Monday. Yeah, some parts of the U.S. cold around Monday or Tuesday, but the Arctic air starts to filter in from the north right there. Okay, so that's Wednesday. And now you can see those minus 10s coming into Montana and starting to breach the continental divide, which is right in here. And some of it moving into the Fraser River Valley. So then we go into Friday and Saturday next week, minus 30s being indicated from British Columbia down into Montana. And then you see the aquas settling in across the northwestern U.S. So this is taking a very westward location. Further to the east, though, southerly flow, which is helping to keep the cold air at bay. This is a pattern that resembles the December 1990 outbreak, which affected the western U.S., so we don't know for sure that things are going to trend this way, but at this time, it looks like a western U.S. event. So there's 228 hours, and that's going to be the last frame, 240 hours. Anything beyond 240, we're not going to go there. We're just going to ignore it. Models are terrible in the long range with these Arctic outbreaks. There's a lot of complexity in the lower elevations, which are very hard to run computations on over time. So we're just going to stick with this as a general guideline of what we're going to see, weather in the northwestern U.S. about like that, and delayed or even not even present in the southeastern U.S. And we'll go ahead and compare that with the European model, which is another great model, might be a little bit more sophisticated than the GFS, but let's bring that forward into the 240-hour time frame. And we definitely do have Arctic air in Western Canada that agrees with the GFS. Also Arctic air across Washington. Further south and into the Great Basin area, not quite as consistent with the GFS. It is bringing the Arctic air into the northern plains and the central U.S. a little bit more aggressive into the Midwest. You can see it's going for -8 there at Chicago, -4, -1 around St. Louis, but not really moving that very fast. And you've probably read in the news about how when we have that polar vortex breakdown, the zonal components diminish, and that allows more cold air to come south. This is kind of the opposite strong zonal flow, keeping the cold air locked in place up to the north, although it has definitely expanded south into the northern part of the U.S. And as far as that sudden stratospheric warming event, this is the 10 millibar chart up at about 100,000 feet for this evening. Major sudden stratospheric warming event is not expected. The models have backed off from that scenario. But we did have the partial warming. We're up to minus 15 at the pole. It used to be about minus 75, so some parts of the northern hemisphere have definitely warmed up. So this is a minor warming. We've still got the vortex in place. The only reversal has been out here near the 180-degree meridian. This is a forecast chart showing height all the way up into the stratosphere. That 10 millibar chart that I showed you, 100,000 feet, it's right through here. You can see we're going forward in time from November, December, and January, and we're right here. So this is showing that drop in annular mode, so not as much rotation due to that vortex breakdown, but there is going to be a wave breaking cascade down to the troposphere. See that right there, that alignment? As it drops down into the lower levels around mid-month, we're going to see that Arctic oscillation, or annular mode, diminish down into -3, -4. So we will get that breakdown in the vortices in the northern hemisphere as we get into the middle part of this month. But most of the big effects are still at least a week or two away. And even though I've shown you model indications of what will probably happen in the U.S., the details have not been fully resolved. Even with the February 2021 event, we did not know a lot of those features and properties of that unusual air mass until we got within about 3 or 4 days. So there's not much that's known. But you should definitely plan for Arctic air if you're in the northwestern U.S. or the northern plains. Good agreement that we will see effects in those regions. The European ensemble probabilities for temperatures below zero are already about 50% in Nebraska, which is a very strong signal. The European chart at 10 millibars shows that even around the 15th through 25th, all the ensembles are trending towards a very low zonal flow, and that's going to take some time to cascade down to the troposphere, so we could be looking at below normal temperatures in parts of North America even into early February. So not all areas will be cold. This definitely tells me anomalous weather is in the cards, but the exact details are unknown. And no, I'm not forecasting another repeat of February 2021. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but this is not convincing evidence that anything like that will be coming. Okay, that will do it for this edition. Sorry that it ran a little bit long. We will be back on Monday for the special supporter edition. So if you want tabs on that storm moving into the central U.S., you need to be a Patreon supporter, and there's the link for that. And of course, my weather forecasting books are available at weathergraphics.com. Your purchases support this program, and those books ship from right here. This is a small business, and we do everything right here. So please consider that. All right, we'll see you back here next week, Monday for the supporters, and on Wednesday for everybody else. Hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye.